Welcome to Coping with COVID-19 by Crossroads Counseling. I'm Travis Frye, and with me are therapists Tim Shaffer, Deanna Moor, Matt Dwight, and David Pilar. So just welcome everybody. I'm glad to be with you today. Our topic is going to be focused on couples, and all of us here see couples and work with couples on a daily basis. And this is a really unique time where couples are really struggling with the quarantine, with kids being home from school, with balancing the responsibilities that they have with work and finances, and now homeschooling their kids for those who actually have kids. But also with the increased time that couples have together. And as we were talking and preparing for this recording today, you know, we talked about how couples, especially those couples who have a lot of issues that are kind of struggling prior to all of this, you know, this can often just bring those to the surface. So we're going to have a little discussion here and hopefully be able to give you some good and helpful information along with some tips on how you can survive and even thrive during this time of you know, social distancing, being at home, and just all of the stress and pressure that's on couples right now. So I just want to kick things off to the team here. And what would you guys, maybe let's just start with, what would you guys want to say to a couple who's listening to this right now, who might be, you know, just really struggling with, you know, communication, struggling with connection, struggling with conflict resolution, struggling with balancing all of those different responsibilities? What are some thoughts that you guys might have and things that you would want to say to couples who are listening to this recording?
I can start it off. I would definitely start with wanting someone listening to know that you're not alone with that. This is unprecedented, and I think it'll probably be a time that goes down in our history books as like extremely strange in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that we know is that community is really important during stressful times. And so to not have that, really as a couple, then you're relying a lot on each other. And if there were already areas where you were struggling going into this, it's probably going to bring up a lot of those constantly, because rather than having your normal community that you're around, you're relying only on each other. And so it would make sense that there would be struggling on any couple, but especially if there were those issues going into it. So.
Yeah. I'm curious, what you guys have been working with couples during this time. What kind of struggles have you seen couples dealing with since the lockdown? What have you guys been noticing?
Well, various things, but with most couples, there's a struggle between how much closeness a couple has, you know, connection, communication, meaningful interactions, turning towards each other on the little things. And those things create connection. But the other side of that, it's sort of like this dynamic tension, is space. And the need for just personal space, especially introverts like myself, who recharge being alone or doing solitary activities. It's really hard for extroverts to be, you know, they recharge by connection mostly, and shared activities. So that I see that tension frequently. it's one dimension to kind of give you a lens of like what's happening, where's the tension coming up here, and versus the content of daily issues like taking the trash out, or how do we react to our kids when they do X, Y, Z. So I think one of the things I find myself saying to people, it's kind of like what you were saying, Matt, was say, hey, this is hard on both of you for these reasons. And at least begin to expand some awareness, some consciousness that it's hard on both of us. And we have different kinds of needs, and they're both very natural, and we're just wired that way.
That's great. That I can absolutely see how that would be kind of walking the tightrope, you know, and being able to find that balance there that you're talking about, Dave. What other kind of issues have you guys encountered in talking to couples, working with couples during this time?
Well, I think that there's, you know, something that we had touched on last week in our video was just, you know, everyone individually too is responding to this a little bit differently, and our strategies can be a little bit different. And there's so much that we're adjusting to. There's so much change that happened so quickly, and just figuring out what our life looks like together now. How can we come together and just kind of make all of these adjustments, and just the different levels of processing with that, and not being able to have that space, like David was saying, just being able to like use those strategies in the confines of everything that's happening. And so just a lot of, you know, the communication and conflict resolution, the things that we're used to doing that help us kind of get by or buffer some of those patterns that come up, figuring out how to adjust to that, I've seen be challenging for my couples too.
Yeah, with that, what would you say to the couple that is actually dealing with that type of issue that you just identified, Deanna? And this doesn't have to be just coming from you, but I'm thinking about that for myself. You know, how would you kind of guide or even like process with a couple who's kind of struggling with that dynamic that you just described?
Yeah, I think I'd want to know a little bit about what fears are coming up for them, and just processing through, because, you know, our strategies come from fear and come from pain. So what fears are coming up for both of them? How is this playing out in the relationship? And just encouraging talking from that space. Like Dave said, it's 99% of the time not about the trash and the dishes, but what's coming up for us in this time of change and fear, and, you know, being able to have those conversations. And if we're not able to, seeking help in these times from safe people, from counselors, to be able to facilitate those conversations so we don't drive a wedge between us.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say, just for clarification, and I think Dave was saying this as well, but moving away from those kind of content related arguments or, you know, issues that might come up in a relationship, and trying to focus in more on what's happening internally. Not all of the time, but a lot of times, you know, there can be something such as fear or some other kind of emotional process that's happening. And if couples can kind of tune in to what's going on internally and shift the conversation, if I'm hearing things right, like there can be a shift in the interaction and the dynamic between the two of them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because I think that
Okay.
fosters an area of empathy. More
Okay.
empathy.
That's great. Any other kind of issues that, you know, you're encountering yourself in your own relationships, or that you've talked about with couples that you've been working with during this pandemic?
Well, I think kind of to piggyback on what Deanna was just saying, a lot of our tension, our stress, our irritations come up from deeper concerns. And like the fears or even the enhanced feeling of loneliness when your partner is actually around more, because your partner's coping with all this stress and your stress by going further inward and being more silent. And so I think I just want to sort of reinforce this idea that just naming what's going on or asking what's going on, this idea of empathy and validation, just when somebody hears, hey, this is really tough, what's on your mind, can really take the tension down and open up some channels of conversation that actually feel connecting and supportive. And so, you know, what are your biggest concerns right now? What are you enjoying right now? They don't have to be real heavy conversations, but just to say, I'm here, I'm open to what you're experiencing, and you can tell me. Makes a big help.
Those are great insights and great recommendations that I think can really, you know, shift some of the dynamics that, you know, couples might be kind of struggling with right now. So thank you, David. You know, as EFT therapists or emotionally focused couples therapists, we talk a lot about patterns that couples get stuck in, kind of rigid and repeating patterns of negativity. I'm just curious, like, for those of you who are, you know, working with couples, talking to couples right now, what are some of the kind of patterns that you're noticing couples struggling with right now?
Yeah, I think with couples who specifically maybe work at home together, I think especially right now, just with the proximity to one another and just with the expectations of trying to work through everything that's going on, I think the stress that they're already facing is just even piled on even greater right now. And I think that the stress that they're facing can sometimes feel isolating, and it's hard to realize that your partner is there with you and, you know, going through the same stress that you are. And so I would just encourage those who are working at home together to look at the stress as a common enemy versus something that's coming in between you. And that's not necessarily easy, but I think if you can make that shift to see stress and the fear and the tension and just everything else that's coming up for you, I think facing that as a team versus seeing it as the wall between you can make a huge difference.
I really like that, Tim. So what I'm hearing you say is if the couple can kind of externalize and see, like, you know, things like what we're talking about, fear and stress and the worry and the anxiety as being their common enemy. You know, when there's a common enemy, it can bring, you know, it can bring two sides together. And so if they can kind of hold that and see that as the common enemy, it can bring them closer together instead of having them turn and fighting with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy to get sucked into it and feel like you're the only one that's facing that stress, or that the other person just has no idea what's going on. But once you make that connection and identify, like, oh wait, we're in this together and we're both facing a ton of stress here, like that can take off a huge load off your plate.
Yeah. And, you know, when we talk about patterns, we know that there's typically one person who, maybe this is kind of tying into what you were talking about too, David, but there's typically one person who is a little bit more of the extrovert, or we would call like that person a little bit more of the pursuer, who is, you know, when they get anxious and when they get afraid, they really want to, they want to reach out, they want to talk, they want to have that other person, you know, physically close, because it helps them to calm their nervous system, right, and calm their fear and their anxiety. But then you have more of the, and I don't know if this is a really fair connection that I'm making, but you have more of the introvert, like with withdrawer person, and that person, when they get stressed and overwhelmed and anxious, a lot of times they need to kind of go more inward and kind of process, and they need that space and time. And this is where, you know, couples kind of do that dance, that universal dance that we see a lot. That's probably magnified right now with all of this stress and anxiety. But you have that person who pursues, and the more they pursue, a lot of times it's very ineffective pursuing, it's anger, frustration. The more this person will kind of shut down, defend, stonewall, pull away. The more they pull away, the more this person pursues, and the more they pursue, the more they pull away. So it just ends up in this really big, you know, circle. So I know there's couples who are listening right now that are like, that's it. That's what we're doing right now. And it's exacerbated and it's intensified. What would you say to that couple who can really relate to that and are really struggling in that pattern? What could you say to them right now to really help them kind of break free from that? We've given some good ideas and good advice, but what would you say to that couple who's really identifying with that and really struggling with that kind of pattern?
Well, the first thing would be to recognize that this pattern is happening at all times with every couple, not just yourselves, and that these circumstances are, as we've been discussing, are very, very unusual and stressful, and that to really make an attempt to see beyond your frustration. And for example, if you're the withdrawer, you like distance and space. Your partner might be constantly going and asking you questions and checking in. What's going on? What are you doing? Who are you talking to? A chore list, whatever it is. To recognize under your frustration that these are bids, just bids to connect. And on the other hand too, that if your partner's getting more silent and frustrated and non-responsive or grouchy, it's not personal. That's easy for me to say, right? Except when my wife does it to me, right? So, but it really is important to be able to see that, you know, there's an old saying, be kind to everybody, because everybody is struggling with, you know, with their own personal pain, their own struggles. And so to be able to see that your partner needs space, and this is hard for them too. And the other thing too is this is a bit on the counterintuitive side. Sometimes I like to have them think in a sense of doing the opposite almost. So if I'm a withdrawer by nature, the more I connect with my partner, the more secure and content he or she will be, and they will be more than happy to give me that space because they need it too, just probably not as much as I do. And if I'm a pursuer, if I could give space, my partner who needs more separate space will actually come closer. And so it's sort of like a George Costanza rule of doing the opposite of what your automatic inclination is to do. And in that way, you're and especially if you voice it, you make it explicit. Hey, I know you need this. I'm going to do this. And that just combines intention with action. That okay, my partner's giving me space because they really appreciate that I need this, and that makes me feel good. I feel appreciated. I'm going to reach out a little bit more.
And
I would just echo what you said, David, of anytime that I've practiced something that seems counterintuitive, that it always goes over well. And I think that that's a really good insight there.
Thanks.
Deanna.
Sorry, Tim. I think what came to mind as David was talking was just that concept of like a relationship or emotional bank account. You know, there's so much stress happening right now that, you know, our partner or we might be just making withdrawal.
Oh, we lost some audio there. Dan, I think we lost a little bit of your audio. So we'll have you come back in a moment. Matt, I'm wondering if you have any feedback.
Yeah. So while David was talking, one of the things that I was thinking of is actually back to a conversation that I was just having yesterday with a couple, and it was more geared towards when that pattern that couples get into gets a little bit more escalated, and there's kind of this like pursuing, and then rather than like a shutting down, when the other partner gets to a place of getting to that defensive place of like, I'm going to kind of fire back a little bit and defend some of my actions, right? And what we were talking about yesterday was how important it can be to even have like a sense, even inside of yourself, of like a pause a little bit. One of the traits that I really admire when I see in other people or see in other couples is a sense of peace almost, or patience, that they can hear things from their partner that they might not necessarily like, but they don't feel the need to have an instant response to it. They can hear what their partner's saying and just kind of sit with it for a second and just kind of say, even internally, like, okay, that's not my intention for whatever they're feeling. You know, I didn't intend to give that off, but that's what they're feeling right now. And so for a second, I'm just going to sit with it and maybe even let them know, right? Like, oh man, I am so sorry you feel that way. And just sit with it for a second. And then there's a time, right? There's what I was talking about yesterday is there's absolutely a time to respond and say, that's not my intention, right? Like I didn't mean for you to feel that way. How can we fix that for the future? But I think it can be a really valuable tool, just kind of universally. And I'm still working on it myself, but to just try to have that pause and that peace that, yeah, my partner can have a thought about something that I disagree with, and that's okay. I'm going to let them sit with that for a second. And we can just talk about that even.
Those are great ideas, Matt. And in all honesty, I'm still working on that too. So Deanna, hopefully we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yay, you're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry if I freeze again. But so what was the last thing that you heard about the bank account?
Just the bank account.
Okay. All right. We'll start right over. But so what Dave was saying earlier really made me think about Gottman has this concept of just an emotional or relationship bank account. And he has this theory too of just, you know, in relationships, especially with our partners, we have to almost have a 5-to-1 positive to negative input ratio. So doing 5 positive things for every 1 negative thing that might happen. And I think especially right now, with our added stress, there's going to be times where we're making more withdrawals from that account from our partner or ourselves because we're stressed and there's so much happening. And so just making an effort and being intentional about making deposits too, about letting your partner know you appreciate them or being grateful for your partner, just making those deposits, I think is really important right now too. And I think I froze again. So I hope that went through.
I hear you loud and clear.
Great news.
And you know, you're just frozen with fear, but we're working through it. It's all good.
We're all just doing the best we can, you know?
Yeah, we just keep moving forward. So we have just a few minutes left. Maybe in like 10 to 15 seconds, what words of encouragement would you guys like to give to a couple who's hearing this right now?
I think for me, just reminding that you're on the same team, that you're in this together. You know, you're both going through things separately and together, and have empathy for your partner, have empathy for yourself. You guys are going to get through this.
One thing I would say to add on to that, which I think that's a great starting point, is that while this is difficult, it's also an opportunity. And think of it as a little crucible, a little pressure cooker that can really bring out some advances. And I would also encourage people to really use it as a time to challenge themselves, to calm and, as we say, regulate yourself. And because what your partner needs most from you when you're in conflict, and what you need most, is the ability to step away from your frustration and to hold all your fears and pain and concerns with an open hand and be able to acknowledge it and accept it. And a lot of great things happen, transformative things happen when two people in a relationship start doing that. And it opens up so many other possibilities. And I would say that even when one person starts doing that, and so I would work on just getting some distance from your frustration, whatever distressful self-talk you have, and feelings that churn in you, to be able to take this time to kind of take some deep breaths in when you're in close proximity with your spouse, and just get some healthy distance. And find your center of gravity and your center of balance. I call it the best part of yourself.
That's beautiful. Thank you, David.
I would also say that right now, in spite of social distancing and physical distancing, that in spite of the intent there, that doesn't mean that you are alone or that you're isolated, but it can create opportunities to reach out to people that maybe they haven't before, and really just trying to find some extra support in this time that's really hard for everyone. So I would just echo what everyone else has said and say that they're not alone, and that they do have each other and others to support them, whether it's Zoom calls or phone calls, FaceTime, any of that good stuff.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, Tim stole the words out of my mouth right there with my encouragement. Is absolutely that we're designed to have community, and we're designed to have obviously one partner that we're extremely close to and can know us really intimately, but we're also designed to be in community with other people too. And so things like Zoom, phone calls, Skype, any of that, those are awesome mediums to use to be able to connect with people. Even though it's not quite as perfect as in person, to still really have that connection with people. My wife and I have been doing board game nights with people over Zoom, where we'll both set up like a board game. It's one that both of us have with another couple, and we'll make moves for each other, so that we can actually have like a game night. And it's actually felt pretty close to real life. So get creative with ways to really be in community with other people, so that you can know, hearing from other people, that you're not alone in this, because you're not.
That's a great and fun idea. I might have to try that myself. So my encouragement would be to know, for you guys to know that you're definitely not alone in this. And similar, we've talked about here that the enemy is fear. The enemy is isolation and loneliness. And if you can find that way to come together and find the balance that you need in your relationship, and fight the fear, I think that that will bring you together. And this is an opportunity, as David said. This is an opportunity. And I hope that you can see it that way as well. Hey, guys, it's been an honor to be with all of you today. Thank you for your time and for your expertise. If you are out there and you need help, just want to encourage you to reach out and call us. We are here. We are offering virtual sessions in the same format. It actually works pretty well. We're also offering telephone sessions, and all you need to do is just call the number that's at the end of this video or visit our website. So blessings to you, and be well, and look for more of these videos because we're going to keep putting them out there and reaching out to the community during this time. Take care.